Okay, Rance.
Okay.
What do you know about a game called True Fantasy Live Online?
Oh God. Next to nothing.
Yes.
I feel like I've heard the name uttered in some context, but that is about the extent of it.
That is perfect.
Ooh,
all right.
All right.
I'm going to roll you a trailer that I have set up, but not really. All right.
Here we go.
So picture you're me, you're 14. You just bought Voodoo Vince on the Xbox. You see this trailer and you're like, what?
Asking the big questions.
What is worth fighting for? Yo, this looks sick.
In a land of fantasy, become the hero you always wanted to be.
They even got that epic trailer guy. Beyond imagination.
The 2000s trailer guy. Holy gosh.
True Fantasy Live Online. Play the game. Live the adventure.
Was that made in part by Square Enix? The typeset, I guess, at least looks very Final Fantasy-like.
Okay, so funny you should say that.
Okay.
So what do you think happened? Broadly.
With this game project?
Yeah.
Okay. I can only assume it got axed for but as to the nuances of why, I could not tell you.
Okay, that's a good assumption because that looks awesome and you would have heard about it.
Yeah,
if it was a real
absolutely.
game. Okay, so that was made by Level 5.
Oh, Level 5 makes sense.
Their next game was Dragon Quest 11. So you're very close. Yeah, so True Fantasy Live Online, which right off the top, I know you joked about this title. This title sucks.
Yeah.
Okay? It's like it's too clever by a half. It's like True Fantasy, like, oh, oxymoron. Live and online are the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like an oxymoron on purpose, followed by redundant words. Awful. Like, just awful. I will say, however, that Level 5 later made a game that's somewhat visually similar but completely different called Fantasy Life. That's a good title. True Fantasy Live Online? That's like, no.
Oh,
God.
God.
Like, if you ask someone to play that, they're no, I'm playing Halo because it's one word. Like, fuck off. And it was going to be an Xbox exclusive MMORPG released in 2002, which is very early, which would have made it the first console MMORPG of its kind. Phantasy Star had been on Dreamcast at that point, but it's a lower concept kind of idea. It has this mythology now. I made a video on this like way back in the day. It's long gone. Essentially, the idea is that it's sort of the one that got away. It's like you get to look at this trailer and think, what could have been this game? I mean, it looks very finished, right? It's very polished looking. And you sort of like wish. I mean, you read a lot of comments and people are like, this should have come out. Like, life would have been different. Princess Diana would still be alive somehow. And realistically, I guess the thesis I want to get at with this video is I want to look at some of the other trailers and other footage and screenshots. And my suspicion, I'll give you the one that's less controversial first. My suspicion is that this game was impossible. What they were pitching could never have worked. My second suspicion, and this is a hot button thing to say, so bear with me here.
Okay.
I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I think this is a fake game to get money from Microsoft.
Ooh.
I don't think this was ever supposed to exist because it makes no sense. Like the more I unravel this thread, the more I'm like, this like straight up could not have run on an Xbox.
Right.
Okay, so with that in mind, with those heavy accusations, I want to load up an image. I want to transport you back to 2002. It used to be kind of fun to make fun of Bill Gates. I don't know if you've searched up his name recently, but he's a part of all these like anti-vax conspiracies. Because he's partially responsible for the commercial privatization of the COVID vaccine.
Right.
Which I don't like.
Yeah.
A lot of people who don't like vaccines posit him as like the Antichrist who's like coming to like microchip your child.
Yeah.
So kind of he's one of those guys everyone hates him for different reasons across the political spectrum. Anyway, let's transport back in time to when it was fun to make fun of Bill Gates because Internet Explorer sucks. He's greedy, whatever. Dwayne Johnson, Xbox with the Duke controller. We'll get back to this. Bill Gates, two very physically different men. Similar levels of charisma. Bill Gates was a kind of fun, exciting guy. If you ever watched the Start Me Up Microsoft or the Windows 95 launch, it's just a bunch of billionaires on stage like clapping and moving and We don't have billionaires like that anymore.
That might be what I'm thinking of. I just remember Bill Gates awkwardly doing a little nerd jig.
Yeah.
that had to be.
I really want to talk about this game. We need to establish a few things first. First is, what is Windows? So Microsoft's first big commercial success was MS-DOS. There were other DOS operating systems, but this one supported a bunch of different platforms. And the Microsoft model was that you make it for every possible platform, sort of like what Ubisoft does now. They're like, we'll make Assassin's Creed for every platform. We'll make an anti-smoking game for the Nintendo DS. Like, we'll make every possible game. That was Microsoft. And they bet on all the horses, and then one of the horses will eventually win, and that horse was IBM. The first Windows, so MS-DOS is like the command line.
Oh, okay.
I probably sound like I'm on drugs right now.
Just go all in.
When you write a program for MS-DOS, you kind of have to interface with like the fact that there's tens of thousands of possible computer combinations, right? Like you could open this and replace the CPU. There's thousands of, So MS-DOS kind of becomes difficult to program for as computers get more complex. The first Microsoft Windows is just a graphical user interface on top of DOS. So it's just pictures to represent what DOS is doing. So it's like, instead of typing in clock.exe, I don't actually know how DOS works. You just click on the clock, right?
Right.
When Windows 95 comes out, Bill Gates does this very strange video where he green screens himself into gameplay of Doom.
Ooh.
So it's like, you watch Doom for a minute, he's shooting people, and then like the gun goes down, and like Bill Gates walks out front, he's like, I'm the Doom guy. And anyway, it was like a marketing thing. And it was a commercial essentially for Windows 95, trying to get developers to come over to Windows. And he promises, this is the best part, he promises to fix this whole DOS mess, which is a masterclass in marketing, because it's a problem that he created.
Right.
Like, he ran the DOS industry, essentially, the whole market. So it's like creating a problem and then promising a solution. So DirectX was going to solve the DOS problem, whatever that means. As I discovered in my research, DirectX, which I'm sure you've heard of when you're installing things, it doesn't actually exist. Like, it's not actually a thing. It's like blast processing on the Genesis.
Ooh.
It's the way they're referring to like thousands of different APIs and features that are in Windows. So it's kind of just another way for them to refer to Windows and what the features.
Wow.
So basically, a lot of what Microsoft did during that era is just marketing nonsense on top of like some actual innovation, but then just a lot of promises. Eventually, Bill Gates himself, personally, I found in my research, becomes worried about the PlayStation 2.
Ooh.
Because they stepped into his wheelhouse. Because game consoles play games. He's not super worried. The PS2 plays DVDs, and Bill Gates was like, what the fuck did you just say? This is an all-encompassing game center. This is like, you plug this into your TV, you go online, what's next? A web browser? Bill Gates is worried, so he decides they're going to make their own console. It took the advancements of DirectX, put it in a box. The developers wanted to call it the DirectX box. They called it, the marketing team won, they called it the Xbox instead. Probably a good move. The DirectX box is a terrible name. Anyway, they had to differentiate themselves from the other consoles. It's the Xbox, as I'm sure you know, is for men. It's for adults. It's for sweaty guys in their college dorms.
Yeah.
And who better to market to than Dwayne Johnson? That's a man, if I ever saw one.
Sweaty man.
That's a sweaty man. That's not a boy. That's a man. Okay? And that controller... I mean, you've seen the Duke controller.
That's a thick boy.
That is the thickest controller. Like, I'm told I have yaoi hands, but even the Duke controller for me is like a bridge too far.
Oh, likewise. Yeah, it's girthy. I got big ass hands in there. I'm just like, I cannot physically hold even the Xbox 360 controller. I'm like, this is
still
pretty
chunky.
big.
Yeah. 360 controller is the sweet spot for me. Whatever this is too much. I think they're trying too hard to send a message. This isn't for boys, this is for men. Like, it's 100% what it's trying to do here. I mean, there's so much in this image. But then, famously, the Xbox wasn't doing great in Japan. Let me load up another image. I love this image. This was part of like kind of fail blog proto cringe culture back in the day. It's like, look at this dumb picture of Bill Gates. I kind of love this picture because I think we could spend a lot of this episode talking about how the United States and Japan are different like countries culturally. I think there's a finite degree to which we're experts on that, and there's a finite degree to which like we're just speculating wildly on cultural differences. Yeah. I think this kind of sums it up. It's like, it's Bill Gates walking in there being like, hey, I know what I am. I'm American. I have a hamburger. Here's my Xbox. That's basically what he's like calling it what it is. I love this ad. But the Xbox did not sell well in Japan, and they didn't. I mean, there's like a couple of Japanese games for the original Xbox. There's like Phantom Dust. I don't even know what that game is. You fight like other anime characters. Eventually, there's Dead or Alive 3. Like, fine. But they wanted to win over some devs, so they got Level 5, which of course at that point their first game was actually Dark Cloud, which is interesting. So they kind of like knocked it out right out of the gate. They do Dark Cloud 2, and then they do True Fantasy Live Online. What is Level 5 promising with True Fantasy Live Online? We saw a bunch of things in the trailer. I'm going to show you some images because there's really a few things to note. One is that it's an MMORPG on a console, which really hadn't been done before. Like they're promising like an EverQuest kind of experience. Phantasy Star Online was kind of just Diablo in 3D. Like you could party up with up to 4 people total, so you can bring 3 people along with you. So it's not an MMO in the way that we know it today. True Fantasy Live is like we're going all out, balls to the wall. I think this is before World of Warcraft. I don't think Final Fantasy XI was out yet, but that's kind of the impression they're giving. Is like these are open areas, and you'll have like dozens, in fact, hundreds of people online with you. So there's that aspect of it. The other thing is that this game looks like it has cell shading, which is another can of worms that I want to get into. So let me find the right screenshot to talk about cell shading, because it's like, how would you describe cell shading, actually?
You know, I've had kind of a weird history with it. Weird history. I think that, you know, sounds more
it's traumatic.
Ostentatious. Yeah, than a lot of the times when I'd see games with cell shading, and, you know, growing up around this period, I was gulping up like so many goddamn garbage anime tie-in games because it's like, oh man, like these are based on like big properties, and in my child mind I assumed like, okay, these are like long running TV series, they probably put a lot of work into like making these like look and play good, but a lot of them are, you know, tie-in junk and everything.
Mixed quality, let's say.
It all looks kind of very like in my mind, even during that time period, it seemed like very immediately dated. And I was like,
interesting.
Yeah, maybe that's unconventional. But I was like, yeah, this just looks very strange and jank and rough. 2 of the Full Metal Alchemist action RPG loosely games came out and were localized in North America. And the first one uses like a very traditional, like kind of fully digital, doesn't like try and capture the anime style.
Oh, it's just 3D straight up.
It's just like pure 3D models. I think it looks nice on PlayStation 2. The second game uses like more of a like cell shading style to like look kind of more anime like, and I was like not really about that. So I was like, this is kind of ugly, and I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I was just of the mindset.
That is a hot take among hot takes, and I respect it because I think cell shading has its fans who are like hardcore. And it's often talked about as a timeless style. But I'm 100% here for the hot take. All right, let's get a good sense of what this game looks like. So this is Full Metal Alchemist 2: Curse of the Crimson Elixir. So there's 2 things with cell shading. Here's the other thing that's going to blow your mind. Maybe you know this already. Cell shading also doesn't exist. Like it's like DirectX, or it's like the term AI, where it's like it refers broadly to a series of like different technology things that aren't really related. Like the term itself refers to like animation cells. So it's like saying toon shading. It's not actually a technical. So it's kind of broadly referring to 2 things. One of which is like the characters having outlines, like you mentioned. The way they do that is really strange. They like render the model twice, and then there's like one on the bottom layer that's slightly larger and all black. And that looks like an outline. The other thing is this like chunky shading. So it's like instead of gradients where it like fades from one shade to another, it's just a block. Like it's a blob of dark or a blob of light.
I was trying to think of a way to articulate it, but like that's just it. Those very blocky, shadowy textures. I was always like, it feels very like an uncanny, like this doesn't feel right to me kind of way. And I like those kind of like gradients, like the smooth tones.
All of which to say, this game was talked about as like having the cell shading. It definitely has the outlines. I actually don't know if it has like the chunky shadows. That I'm just coining that term, chunky shadows. It's a little unclear to me because Dark Cloud 2 doesn't seem to have cell shading in the way we define it today, even though that game looks so like anime-like, right? I think they're just unshaded textures, so it's like whatever they drew, that's the texture, or the textures ignore the lighting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think there are outlines on things, but there's not like chunky shadows because I think the PS2 is just a more limited console in terms of like dynamic graphics. Part of my thesis for this video is like, is this game possible? Let me switch back to the True Fantasy Live. Could True Fantasy have run, or is it just like friggin' fake? I don't know. So the cell shading thing, I looked into this. Like, does it impact performance? Is it harder to do cell shading versus in terms of like the outlines? Because it sounds like you have to render the character twice and one on the bottom layer. The thing is, no one really knows. So what impacts performance in modern hardware is like the size of the levels in terms of your draw distance, level of detail in terms of the polygons, which is kind of handled in software now or in engine. And then there's like particle effects. Those are the killers. In terms of like how the model is shaded, like it doesn't matter. Like computers, like consoles are so fast that no one even pays attention anymore. Like you can build a game that's basically unoptimized now, and like the engine will kind of handle it for you. I know it sounds like a series of hot takes on game engines, but like the consoles are powerful enough that a lot of those old optimizations don't matter. And so when I look up these questions about like rendering cell shading, how would the PS2 handle it? Like no one knows. And the people who know haven't written about it. I guess the question I'm trying to get at is like this looks like a huge environment, right?
Yeah.
Like especially for a PS2 game. Like I want you to think of like Kingdom Hearts 1. Every environment in that game is like a room.
Oh,
it's like a tiny ass room.
Yeah. Like Destiny Islands in itself is like one world, but it's arguably the smallest world in Kingdom Hearts. Definitely some of the environments are blocked off by load screens naturally, and so it kind of segments everything for sure. It's not like and even then it's like nothing like these kind of like expansive vistas here. Like that's pretty massive.
Yeah, and it raises this question like how big of an environment can you do in an Xbox game generally? Because Halo has these kind of big environments. But crucially, there's a number of things happening with Halo. One is that the environments are kind of empty most of the time. So the busiest levels in Halo, they're like corridors, and it's all about total poly count. So if you're in a tiny hallway, you can load it up with like grunts or whatever. And then when you think of like your first experience on the Halo, what's it called? The Halo, whatever.
On the Halo.
When you fly down to the planet, like... Yeah, it's like a huge environment. You're like, well, this console can render huge places, but there's like 5 trees and you. And like it's so empty. So I'm looking at this and I'm looking at like this level. It's like a forest thing. There's like there's like quite a few character models here. There's a lot of trees. The draw distance seems pretty far. This looks very advanced. Like Final Fantasy 11, when it ran on PC, which came out later, I believe, does not look like this. Like this looks way too good to actually run. On top of the fact that when you have an MMO, that adds to the RAM because there has to be netcode. You have to render, you have to update what other players are doing. Other players can have customizable outfits, which was going to be a huge feature of this game. So like one guy walks in with like a high poly cowboy hat and suddenly the whole game crashes, right? On top of that, they promised voice chat, not because Level 5 wanted that. So here's where things get kind of sticky. And partly why the game gets canceled is allegedly that there were just clashes between Microsoft and Level 5. The CEO of Level 5 has since like said some pretty harsh things about Microsoft. And a lot of that in popular culture is chalked up to like cultural differences. But the big concrete thing that a lot of people have talked about is that Level 5 wanted to have text chat and Microsoft wanted Xbox Live to be the voice chat system. In addition to the fact that the original Xbox never had a keyboard. So Level 5 is like really pushing the text chat. So you see here there's like multiple characters talking at once. And there's some like famous screenshots where there's like 8 different people just like huddled having a conversation. In a lot of the screenshots that were sent to Gaming Press, there's just text chat going nuts. Like everyone's using text chat to talk to each other. And so it's like Level 5 really wanted that in the game. And they were kind of dead set on like, yeah, you can add voice chat maybe, but like we want this to be a text chat experience. And Microsoft straight up was like, do not put that in the game. We will cancel your game if you include text chat at all. And so you see both in a lot of the early trailers. You see text chat and voice chat kind of simultaneously. The thing with voice chat is like, it's great for Halo 2 matches where there's, I think, up to 16 players, maybe less. It's not that much audio to stream. It's like, fine, whatever. To do it at this scale with like perhaps dozens of players in an environment. World of Warcraft would not get voice chat until like 2008 with the Lich King expansion, possibly 2006. But whatever the date is, like it came way later than this. So they're like already promising stuff that like other MMOs cannot do. And crucially, like on a Windows PC, like you can run Ventrilo or TeamSpeak in another app and it's fine because your computer has all the RAM, whatever. Like the Xbox like runs one program at a time and it's your game. So it's like they're promising voice chat and like these huge parties and like customizable, and these environments just look massive. There's so many things in this game that just don't look like they could have ever run. Like look how many players there are here.
Even like some of the textures of the trees, like there's, you know, a lot of kind of greenery and like brown shades and like a lot of gradients and nuance to it. Like there's They're not just like gray, green texture like planted right there. It's like
this looks
more
pretty
elaborate.
detailed. Yeah. And the question I have is like for the game to look this good, and if we go back to the trailer, like they just show you so many places, right?
Yeah.
Like my question is, look how much work they did. Like look how far along they got in the development and then just like canceled the game. Like it's very bizarre to me for them to build this many models. Because on some level, this has to mean that they built like that they wrote a story, that there was lore, that they built towns, and there's so much wasted labor. I just can't fathom.
Yeah.
My comparison will be in terms of another similar game is like Final Fantasy 11 online, right, for PS2, which ran natively on the PS2. Crucially, that game on PS2 looks like shit. Like it looks so bad.
Right.
Toward the end, when they're adding more expansions, it ran at like 5 frames a second.
Oh yeah.
Very low res. Text chat only. Also, here's the other thing. So I know the PS2 is generally thought of as being less powerful. The PS2 version of Final Fantasy 11, it took 12 gigs to install. The Xbox hard drive was 8 gigabytes total.
Oh.
And you could only use a chunk of that for a game because like there had to be system software, and then you have your other game save files. You have your Smash Mouth CDs that you've ripped. It's like, how much room could this have? Because it's either you install the game to the hard drive or your load times are off the hook.
Oh god.
How are they going to make this run? There's no expansion cards. You can't add another hard drive. The other thing with Final Fantasy XI is that to make it run on the PS2, they did a lot of the calculating server side instead of console side. If you've ever played a game like that, it is like abysmally slow. Final Fantasy XI was turn-based. So if you have like slower load times, it's kind of okay.
Yeah.
But this game would have been in real time. Somehow they would have had to figure out whether the loading is done on the server or on the console. There's just so many questions that, like, in hindsight, I'm like, there's no way this game could have run. Like, this seems like an impossible project.
Yeah.
The other thing with level 5 that's interesting is you and I both know White Knight Chronicles, which is a funny title for anything. But when they did that game, it was also kind of hyped up as being like this great online experience. It looked kind of MMO-ish. And the game drops, and it's that same Phantasy Star thing. It's like 4 players in a quest together online, instanced, and then like the only massive part, like massively multiplayer part of it, is like this chat room of 20 people.
Right.
So there's like little 20 people text chat rooms, and then you can go with 4 people total and play a quest.
Yeah.
And it's like even a whole generation later, on the next generation's most powerful console, they could not get netcode working beyond 4 players.
Craziness.
So it's like there's no way this would have happened. This was a fake game. I'm calling it now. This was a fake game. How do you feel knowing that this game that you just discovered existed is not real?
You know, considering level 5's reputation as like kind of a, you know, they've had a few ups and downs, but I think as far as, you know, marketing and kind of, you know, just how they're presented kind of in the public eye and everything, they seem to be like this very like lucrative and kind of illustrious name brand as far as like RPG developers go. So
people like their games.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, to hear such a like ambitious project that, you know, dating all the way back to the Xbox period and having that fall through, and that's kind of a huge blow, but it seems like, you know, it's not very talked about. I mean, it was my first time learning about it today, so that's nice. That's crazy.
And yeah, level 5, the funny thing with them is like the games that they make that people don't like. So like White Knight Chronicles was pretty not well received.
Yeah.
It was very polished. It was like a AAA level of like just it ran smoothly and all the graphics looked nice. And all the problems were like, it was just a boring game or like some of the mechanics were like not well thought out or just weren't fun.
Right.
But everything ran really well.
Yeah.
And so I wonder about this game, like, is it a similar level of like, they started with a bunch of bad ideas, such as like, you know, this whole issue they had with Microsoft, like stuff that they thought they could work out those differences later. And then they went to this point where like, this looks like a finished game. If I'm being honest, like there's lighting, the textures look nice. If I saw this in the wild, and it's not like they just made a couple fake environments. Like, how did they get this far along? How did they make this many models? This is like over a year of just making models. Like, this is insane. And it's like, how did they get this far with such a flawed premise?
Yeah.
Is my question.
Craziness.
So anyway, True Fantasy Live Online. It got canceled. Was it ever going to be a real game? I don't think so. But that's my hot take of the day. yeah, this has been Computer Lab Hijinks. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and I don't like when people say that, so I'm not going to say it. Don't dislike
Live
it.
your life. Do what you want, man.
Don't subscribe. Burn your computer. Go live in the forest with all the other happy
Start
people.
some fights in the comment section, in real life, touching
Yes.
grass. Who knows?
Go touch grass.
Touching grass, smoking grass. Do what you want.
Don't argue about fake games that don't exist. Here we get anyway, go to a bar, fall in love, go meet your soulmate. Thanks for watching. That was a good ending.